Chapter 405, City of Adventures. Boom! The resounding eruption caused by the destruction of the earth spread throughout the city. Everyone within earshot could hear the loud crash, and those who were still too far to listen were greeted by the rumbles that rushed from the ground. All of this chaos stemmed from a single location. The same place where Jet and Lux stood. Eek! Upon seeing their leader completely lose consciousness from a single hit, the remaining 5 stooges began to squeak in fear. Sango's ebony body was buried in the ground, covered in dirt and debris. He was literally foaming in the mouth, his eyes completely white due to the shock that sent him straight to sleep. Vestiges of lightning crackled from his body as smoke rose all around a crater that formed on the ground. Everyone was dead silent, holding their breath as they stared at this amazing sight in awe. Sango was among the strongest adventurers in the city, having a 5-star rank. He was a master adventurer, and everyone treated him as such. Seeing him get his arse handed to him just like that was a surreal experience for everyone who watched. It didn't take long before murmurs began to echo forth. "Are you kidding? Just one hit?" Even stronger adventurers would not have ended it with just one hit. Maybe it's because he was drunk. You idiot. Have you ever seen Sango pass out due to alcohol before? He was sober? You're joking. I couldn't even see the strike. What kind of move was that? All eyes shifted from Sango, and the curious gazes of everyone rested on the perpetrators of the entire mess. The gentleman in black and the maiden in white, their existence caused the hearts of many to tremble. If she was able to do that, does that mean that man is also capable of that much? They're partners, after all. It's a given. But even master rank adventurers wouldn't have knocked Sango out like that. Oi. What are you saying? That there's somehow heroic rank? Come on. SHH. Don't be so loud, or they'll hear you. The adventurers were terrified, sure. But beyond that, they were fascinated. Perhaps the 2 strangers recognized this, because instead of departing the way they previously intended, they remained still. After soaking up all of the attention for a few seconds, the dark-clad gentleman took off his hat, revealing his incredibly handsome face. Following his lead, the woman did the same. Instantly, all the noise surrounding the duo sizzled out. Everyone's jaws went loose as they opened wide in reaction to the beauty that they were faced with. Before they could even take it all in, the confident tone of the man filled the air. My name is Jet, and my partner's name is Lux. I won't ask you to remember our names, because soon you will have no choice but to know them. These would have been viewed as haughty statements if they hadn't just trumped one of the strongest adventurers in the city. My goal is simple. To surpass Jet Zephyr as the strongest adventurer in the history of the city. And spread my name to the entire world. With this declaration made, all the widened eyes served as witnesses. On that very day, a promise was made to every denizen of the adventurer's city, and it was not received with scorn. For deep within their hearts, the adventurers hoped that they would be able to see the time when the young man's dream would ripen and bear fruit. They all desired the day of the promise's fulfillment. How pitiful. A particular figure stood beside the window of her room and watched the events that unfolded beneath her with a scrutinizing gaze. Her lips were pursed in disapproval, and her cold gaze narrowed upon hearing the declaration of the man called Jet. Surpass Lord Zephyr? What a foolish statement. She muttered with her moist lips. Her dirty blonde hair flowed behind her as she folded her hands beneath her modest chest. She couldn't help but glare at the ridiculously attractive man and woman who were now the center of attention. So just because the lady managed to beat Sango, everyone suddenly takes the man's declaration seriously? My goodness, adventurers really are a bunch of simple-minded buffoons. The lady shook her head and sighed, leaving the window as she heard a knock on her door. I've seen fools like them more times than I can count, thinking they can make it big in the adventurer's city just because they're a little strong. The 6-star badge on her chest glistened on her chest as she reached for the doorknob. She had specifically made sure no one disturbed her in her living quarters. The only exception to this rule was if her urgent attention was needed. What is it? She asked, once her hand was placed on the doorknob. Why yes, Miss Britta. 2 adventurer candidates wish to take the heroic rank test. I came to deliver their forms to you for screening since you're their designated examiner. The woman closed her eyes and sighed. Somehow, she already knew this would be the case. That wasn't all she figured out, though. Let me guess. The names on those forms are Lux and Jet. Why yes, ma'am. The voice from behind the door swiftly answered, though the stuttering made her response too clumsy to be considered proper. Regardless, her tone indicated surprise. Heroic rank adventurers were known to do some pretty amazing things, but clairvoyance was a little too much for a fighter-type adventurer like Britta. How could she have perfectly guessed the names? Creak. The door opened and Britta took the 2 forms from the trembling delivery staff, who instantly scrambled off once she was done with her delivery. Britta sighed, closed the door, and took a good look at the document, her green eyes taking in every single detail that was on the pieces of paper. Foolish newbies. Britta smiled as she threw the forms aside and grinned to herself. Fools who went so far to take the heroic rank test were very rare, but they existed. Britta had supervised her fair share, so she knew what happened to the few overly ambitious folks who bit off more than they could chew. Without exception. They all died. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. The setup is still in progress, so just keep sailing smoothly on these gentle tides. If you've made it this far, I assume you already know my style. Chapter 406, Jet and Lux. Ha! This heavy sigh came from Jet as he took his seat on a sizable bed at the far right corner of a spacious room. His gaze was on the girl with him, who sat on the other bed, which was located at the extreme end opposite him. There was a large window at the corner of the wall that stood beside both beds, causing the dim evening lights to shower in. There were also enchanted lamps to give the room a bright enough ambience. Objectively speaking, it was a neat room. A bit minimalistic, with the furniture having only a wardrobe, 2 bedside tables, a study desk and chair, and of course, their beds, but everything seemed to be in good order. They had more than enough space to put whatever stuff they wanted to add to the room. It was clearly designed this way so that adventurers could set everything else up according to their preferences. Any normal person would look at this place and be genuinely impressed. However, both Jet and Lux had to admit to themselves as they looked around them. Compared to the places they were used to, this place was mediocre at best. The bed is pretty uncomfortable. Jet broke the silence, sighing even more. I thought I was the only one who noticed. For the first time ever, Lux responded with her own voice. It was so enchanting and smooth that anyone who heard it would instantly fall in love with it. The 2 laughed as soon as they heard each other speak, instantly getting rid of the dreary atmosphere that existed within the room. It is what it is. This is the most expensive inn we can get in the city. Unless we want to get a proper house, which won't be worth it since we're just going to be here for a week or so. Yeah, I get it. Lux responded to Jet's elaborate explanation with a shrug. They both took off their hats and hoods, revealing the incredibly attractive faces that they both had. Suddenly, they laughed at each other once again. Is that really what you look like underneath the mask? Lux giggled as her previously human ears became pointy. Other than that small difference, she remained the same. Of course not. You think I'll reveal my face to anyone here? If you had some kind of shape-shifting ability, I would have preferred it if you could also have a different appearance. Jet put on a dark mask, and soon, his entire body transformed into a completely different form. His pale skin took on a much more normal complexion, he became a lot taller and bulkier than he previously was. In no time, he left the identity of Jet behind and took on a completely different one. Relix. I wonder if you're really buff like that in real appearance. Lux, no, more like the half-elf, Esm smiled as she looked at the new person in front of her. I am. I don't believe you. For real. I'm pretty buff. I think. Then prove it. Show me your true self, Ray. Ah, I shouldn't have said your real name, right? Esm looked a bit nervous, but the guy opposite her merely shrugged it off. Sound magic is active, so I guess it's fine. Ah, yeah. I forgot about that. She laughed, itching her white hair. You know I won't show you my true form, right? Ray said with a playful tone. Yeah. It's not fair, though. You've practically seen me naked, yet I can't get even a glimpse at your face. Hey. Why are you bringing that up now? Why, you know it wasn't on purpose or anything. The moment Esm heard this reaction from Ray, she made a naughty smile and stared at him in a particularly unnerving fashion. Why are you looking at me like that? How about a trade? A trade? Don't tell me. Even with the black mask covering his face, Ray's bulging eyes could be seen. Yes. I'll let you see me nude again. In exchange, I want to see your face. It was a strange thing for a girl to say. Most guys would never hear those words from any lady, especially if the lady was as drop-dead gorgeous as Esm. Yet, she was willing to make such a bargain? Ray's silence after hearing this was evidence of how difficult it was to reject such a tempting offer. The last time, everything happened too fast for him to burn the image in his mind. But now things were different. I think I. Just kidding. Haha. As if I'd do something like that. Ha 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 ha. Esm's loud giggles drowned whatever response Ray would have given to her offer. Thanks to that, hollow silence reigned supreme after the laugh was done. No one said anything for a while. Then. At least let me see your body. No. Come on. You can cover your face with your mask, so it's pretty much the same thing. I refuse. Please. Pretty please. I'm dying of curiosity here. After an exhausting round of back and forth, Ray finally gave in with a very loud sigh. Fine, I'll tell you. He mumbled, almost as if he was being shy about it. This is my true form. Huh. I sort of grew taller and buffer after leveling up a lot. So, yeah. I'm pretty much as tall and as buff as my Relix persona. You're serious? Esm's eyes widened at the realization. That meant, all this time, she had been speaking to the real Ray. With no barrier that wasn't the mask present. That meant, right now, Ray was. Of course I'm kidding. Why would I show you how I truly look like? Why you? If not for Ray's sound magic, the next round of arguments, especially from Esm, would have blown the whole room apart. Fortunately, it all eventually sizzled out. Only after a few hours, though. Huff. Huff. Are you done? Ray asked, his hoarse voice a clear sign that he too had to raise his voice at some point in order to match Esm's. Why yet? I think so. With peace and sanity restored within the room, both Ray and Esm finally had the clear mind to discuss what they should have talked about from the start. Now that we've made it this far, I suppose it's time to talk about what our next move is. Ray said, looking straight at the smiling Esm. Yeah. As fun as it was to put on new costumes and pretend to be different people, there was a very important reason why they had chosen to do all of this. It looks like the plan to establish ourselves worked well, though. Esm commented, recalling the events that led to their current predicament. Yeah. A little too well, though. What do you mean? I know you used sound magic on that receptionist so that everyone in the hall could hear what she said. She stated. We got the attention you wanted. It was for the same reason that he agreed to expose their faces in public. Yeah, but I had nothing to do with that barbarian from earlier. Really? I thought you controlled him or something. Esm responded casually. Guess I was wrong. Yeah. That guy was just being a natural idiot. Thanks to that, though, their names became known among the adventurers pretty early. The initial plan was to pass the heroic rank test today and spread our names using that method, so when that receptionist said we would have to take it tomorrow, I was a bit disappointed. Esm couldn't see this, but Ray was smiling underneath his mask. It's a good thing that idiot approached us and caused such a scene. Ray plopped on the hard bed and stared at the ceiling with a look of gratification imprinted on his face. His tone also did well to convey his satisfaction. Now everything is going according to plan. Right on schedule. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. I know it was pretty obvious who these people were, so I won't even bother with the surprise. Hope you enjoyed the chapter. I know I did. Chapter 407, The Adventuring Plan. What should I do now? That was the question Ray asked himself when he thought of the Grand Calamity Dungeon. It posed too much of a risk to him, and everything he had built thus far, if he decided to go as Relix. If Adrian was indeed behind what was going on, there was a huge chance he was being lured in. The mere possibility that he was being used made Ray rule out his strongest card, Relix. That wasn't the only reason, though. Ray wasn't sure how far the name of Relix had spread, so it would be too much of a risk if he used his most influential persona. He would stick out like a sore thumb, and that would ruin the point of everything. Of course, not all attention was bad. However, in the case of his identity as Relix, it was much better for him to get no attention at all than for him to get any. Relix is someone who is already an adventurer, but is keeping his identity secret. It would be weird if I had to register as an adventurer while being Relix. It would literally cause his persona to crumble. Besides, until he could confirm if Adrian was behind the incident or not, perhaps even figure out what his plan could be, Ray decided it was best not to use his Relix persona. That was probably what was best for everyone, himself most of all. What then? If not Relix, then how was he going to get the freedom to properly explore and investigate the city? The answer was pretty simple. I'll just make another alt account. That was how the Dark Gentleman Jet came to be. He decided on a new set of clothes and chose a different aesthetic, even abandoning his staple mask. This way, people would be able to differentiate him from Relix, at the very least. Also, despite still pretty much being the same person. Ray knew he would have to use completely different sets of abilities as Jet in order for any observers not to draw any kind of connection between him and Relix. He also had to be considerably weaker. Despite how much Ray disliked Adrian Chase, the guy had a very good point. There can't be two Relix. Jet would simply be a powerful adventurer who had reached a considerable height in power enough to rival the strongest of adventurers. Nothing more. Nothing less. It was all of those thoughts that led to this exact moment, Ray and Esm journeying to the adventurer's city together. For Ray, it was to investigate the entire Grand Calamity class dungeon, while for Esm, this would be a good opportunity for her to level up and grow stronger. Of course, Ray was also going to get as strong as possible, but that just wasn't his primary goal. Well, things are certainly looking up. Esm smiled as she wore a more casual outfit, her white hair still dripping with water despite tying a towel around it. It seemed she just had a shower, though her oversized sweater and shorts showed that she changed before coming out. Her slightly moist legs gave an alluring glow, but Ray looked away before his senses could get sucked into the beauty. I mean, I had no idea that I would get the chance to level up this fast, she added. Sitting on the bed opposite where Ray was, she crossed her legs and rested her face on one of her open palms. Thanks for considering me for this mission. Well, it's not like I can let you remain weak forever, Ray commented, still refusing to look in her direction. Wow. That one seriously burns. But don't worry, I'll catch up to you in no time. The moment she said this, Ray snickered and gave a sarcastic nod. His response naturally made Esm's face turn beet red, and she looked around for something to throw at him. Unfortunately, after their earlier argument, she was all out of ammunition. Besides, after thinking of it for a few moments, her anger sizzled out. Ray wasn't particularly wrong, after all. Yeah, you're right. I am pretty weak. She smiled, narrowing her gaze on him as she did so. I owe you one. Thanks. This time, it was Ray's turn to be slightly flustered. Of course, Esm could see none of it since it was hidden behind the mask. Well, it's no big deal. Besides, I'm not doing it just for your sake anyway. I'll also get stronger. If he was lucky, there would be some powerful monsters who could give him some pretty sweet EXP also, the chance of him obtaining some pretty neat skills were also high. But you could go on your own, right? Bringing me along will only split your EXP. I could also get in the way if we encounter an absurdly strong monster. Esm responded, her smile becoming more warm and understanding. What's your point? Nothing. I just really appreciate your consideration. She giggled, before flexing her small hands as if there were muscles there. Don't worry. I'll make you proud and get crazy strong. It made Ray break character for a moment and laugh his heart out. You better. Both sides enjoyed their conversation after that, with the moon watching over them atop the night sky. Within the base of the strongest party of the adventurer's city, a certain individual sat on his grand seat, the spot reserved only for the party leader. A dark shadow was cast over this figure, so nothing but the yellow sparks in his eyes were displayed. Perhaps this was a good thing for the 6 who were kneeling in front of him, Sango and his 5 drunk subordinates. So, you mean to tell me that you guys went and harassed the guy out of nowhere, and still got your asses handed to you? Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. The plot marches onward, and you all are coming with me. Looks like it's finally time for the test. Chapter 408, the test commences. The looks on Sango's bruised face showed just how badly his body and pride had been damaged. There was no fury on his face, however. Just pure reflection. I'm sorry, boss. I'll take full responsibility for all this. Sango groveled even further, perhaps to satiate their party leader's anger, but his actions were misdirected. The boss wasn't upset at all. Instead, he appeared curious, having a smile on his clear and youthful face. How interesting. Tell me more about those two adventurers. Well, they called themselves Jet and Luxury. Jet and Lux? Go on. The party leader said with a smile on his face. Well. Also. Sango went on to fully describe the entire incident, including how he shamefully got his arse handed to him and couldn't remember what happened after that. His story was met with a round of laughter from the leader naturally. Well, you guys are definitely going to apologize to him. The boss finally stopped his laughter, wiping away the beads of tears that formed on his face. Don't worry, I'll go with you. He smiled. But. No buts. A party leader has to take responsibility for those in their party. The silhouette commented with a broad grin. Besides, I'm a bit curious about those two. Narrowing his gaze, almost as if something new dropped in his mind, the boss rubbed his chin and parted his lips. This Jet. Did he have a mask on? No. Then you saw his face? How did he look? He was very attractive, or so I hear. I was knocked out cold before I could get a good look, and those guys were too drunk to serve as any reliable source of information. Of course, Sango's retort was met with loud comebacks from his kneeling subordinates. We saw. He was very handsome. The lady with him was also pretty. So pretty that I sobered up the moment I saw her. Their words seemed exaggerated, but everyone knew it would be unwise to lie to the party leader. The moment the seated man heard this, he rubbed his chin and narrowed his eyes even further in order to scrutinize the information even more. It's not him, then. He muttered, barely audibly. This doesn't seem like his style at all. He sighed, the wide grin on his face vanishing as he rose to his feet, his frame seeming like an intimidating silhouette compared to his kneeling comrades. I still want to meet him, though. This Jet fellow. He walked past them, his hand in his pockets as his jet black coat fluttered flailed behind him and his 6-star badge gleamed under the dim light of the room. He seems interesting. Good afternoon, you two. My name is Britta, and I will be the one supervising your heroic rank test today. A fierce-looking woman with dirty blonde hair stared at both Jet and Lux with a piercing stare. She wasn't particularly beautiful, but she had a certain cuteness that came with being so serious and stern all the time. A few freckles could be seen on her nose, and a black birthmark in the form of a dot sat underneath her left eye. She was dressed in full gear light armor that seemed to be made from a combination of monster hides. Her chest was covered with proper breastplates, with her back, shoulder, hands, lower legs, and other relevant areas covered in denser armor than the rest of her body. Most of everything else were fabric, though based on the way they gleamed under the sun, it was clear that they weren't just normal clothes. Britta was garbed with her full set of enchanted items, including a blade behind her, a dagger strapped to her waist, and several pouches attached to her belt. Her boots were squeaky clean, but they looked aged due to how many times they had been used. Last, but not least, her 6-star badge was firmly placed at the center of her belt, perfectly enunciating her adventurer rank to the two candidates. All in all, she was the perfect representation of an adventurer. The pinnacle of what everyone in the city strived to be. Good afternoon, Britta. We will be in your care. Jet responded with a slight bow. What's with that casual tone? Call me Miss Britta. Ah, apologies. Miss Britta. Despite Jet correcting himself and even bowing lower than before, Britta couldn't help but frown even more. Somehow, she felt like he was being sarcastic. Well, whatever. She sighed, shrugging the whole matter aside. Britta didn't consider herself petty enough to get hung over little things like that. We're going to be taking a bit of a tour inside there. Pointing towards the dense forest that stood to their left, she went on to explain. This place is known as the Dead Zone. It's considered dangerous, even by adventurer standards, and that's because powerful monsters reside inside. It was home to an entire ecosystem where the strong devoured the weak, creating a boiling pot for monsters to grow and evolve into stronger entities. The only reason adventurers didn't bother clearing the forest, assuming it was even possible to do so, was because the Dead Zone helped them to breed monsters for free. As long as they occasionally patrolled the forest at scheduled times, and conducted the systematic culling that held every year or so, there was no risk to the city. An outbreak had only happened once, and after that there had been more safety measures put in place to ensure it was not a danger to the city despite being a dangerous place by every right. I'm sure you were already told this by the receptionist when you returned to the guild and she directed you here, but your goal for this test is pretty simple. Britta folded her arms and gave a wide smile, with a deadly gleam explicitly exposed within her eyes. Both of you must defeat at least one A-tier monster each. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Looks like we're finally gonna be getting action soon. Chapter 409, Heroic Rank Test. The hierarchy within the adventurers' city wasn't arbitrary. There was a reason why the adventurers were divided into cotters, and it wasn't just for status and wealth. The most pertinent reason was competence. How strong a person was determined their rank. How, then, could this strength be examined? It couldn't be properly gauged by mere exhibitions of skills, or written exams. Even combat training or duels couldn't properly bring out the full potential or power of a person. There was only one true way for an aspiring adventurer to prove their strength: hunting down monsters. An adventurer did many things, but the specialty of the trade remained monster extermination and dungeon exploration. No one did these better than adventurers. Novices can only handle EF-tier monsters. Commons can easily handle E-tier monsters, but will find it difficult to beat a D-tier monster. Veterans can easily handle any D-tier monster and below, but their limits are C-tiers. An expert can handle a C-tier monster on his own, but it will be very difficult to win against a B-tier monster. Though they can win. As Britta explained this, the two candidates in front of her were silent and listened. 5 stars, that is, masters, can pretty much handle B-tier monsters, but can't beat A-tier monsters on their own. Her tone suddenly took a serious tone. That is where the heroic rank comes in. Everyone knew just how powerful and amazing those in this rank were because they were the only ones who could stand up to the strongest kinds of monsters. That made them the strongest humans. 6-star adventurers like myself can beat at least one A-tier monsters without any issue. As you know, the strongest tier a monster has is A, same as we humans. The key difference, however, was that monsters were far more suited to combat than human beings. They had sharp claws, tough hides, immense mana levels, and their instincts were geared towards violence and destruction. In all areas of combat, monsters outranked humans. As such, A-tier humans would find it incredibly difficult to win a head-on fight with an A-tier monster. Thankfully, humans had intelligence on their side. With the right strategy, it was possible to win. Also as important as strategy, if not more important, was having proper equipment. There was a reason why enchanted items were so costly, and that was simply because having supplementary power from external sources was a big game changer when it came to combat. In fact, in many scenarios, the boost that items gave adventurers was the sole reason they could maintain their rank and survive till date. With these equipment, A-tier humans referred to as heroic rank adventurers in the city could easily handle 1 or 2 A-tier monsters without even needing strategy. The existence of enchanted items remain the perfect representation of human innovation. Since you too desire to become 6-star adventurers, all you need to do is kill A-tier monsters each. As long as you can do so, you pass. Of course, it went without saying that they couldn't rely on teamwork to win. The test was for the individual and not the party. Both Jet and Lux nodded their heads, displaying their readiness for what awaited them. Britta couldn't help but scoff at this. Since you now understand the rules, let us depart. These two. What fools they are. Britta found her thoughts trailing as they walked through the dense cluster of trees. Her full sense was active, so even if she couldn't properly see through the shrubbery, she could detect every movement around her. The weather was pretty cool in the forest, and thanks to the taller trees serving as canopies to block the sun, it got pretty dark despite the day still being in session. Britta had no problem seeing despite the darkness, though. Her incredible senses never dulled, and even now she could clearly see the movements of those in front of her. They were walking very casually despite being in a dead zone. They probably have no idea how dangerous this place is. Especially the current path we're treading on. There was a reason why the guild had to request for her to supervise the two, despite how high-ranked she was. Only 6-star adventurers could survive this particular portion of the dead zone. The guild master and that brat won't take on the role, so that leaves only me to take care of losers like these. Britta's frown only deepened as they advanced even further. Since this wasn't the first time doing something like this, she made a general rule when it came to supervising heroic rank tests. I have no responsibility to save the fools who brought this upon themselves. Candidates were the ones who made the choice to come to such a dangerous place, and as such, they had the full liability for their actions. It was that simple. We're close. Britta said as she called for the 2 candidates in front of her. Her role was to observe them, so naturally they were the ones who would take the lead. Still, she had to at least inform them when the test would begin. Now that she had done her part, the rest was up to them. The 2 nodded at her and proceeded, still having the same casual air about them. It pissed Britta off, but she let the matter go. I hope they trip on an undergrowth or 2. Her thoughts ended up revealing her true feelings. Then. Huh? What's this? A sudden sensation assailed Britta, giving her instant goosebumps. Before she could fully comprehend what her senses were telling her, it was already too late. Whoosh! A sharp, powerful gust of wind instantly blew from the direction they were heading, instantly clearing everything in its path. The tress, undergrowth, literally everything flew away, carried away by the wind torrents that rushed forth. In a single, blurry moment, the entire forest where they traversed had become nothing but a large clearing. This is. Beads of sweat fell from Britta's face as her eyes widened in shock. As a 6-star adventurer, she knew precisely what this meant. And it wasn't good at all. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Britta is best girl for me, so yeah. Might as well write her into the story's romance. Come fight me. Chapter 410, Heroic Rank Test. Boom. As the several trees flew and crashed against their fellow trees, sending the resultant debris flying in multiple directions, a disjointed echo of destruction followed. Layers of catastrophes caused the ground to shake violently, almost as if an earthquake was about to occur and swallow everything whole. Britta shook amidst this literal disaster, realizing that the walls of trees that once stood beside her were no more. She was even more surprised that, despite what just happened, she wasn't harmed at all. "Are you all right, Miss Britta?" Jet approached the shaken adventurer, his tone still calm despite the crazy thing that just happened. "Why yeah, I am. It seems the two of you are all right as well." Britta was just as surprised if not more surprised by the fact that the two candidates were unscathed as well. Even if her case was luck, it was impossible for the two of them, who were right in front of her, to not have been affected. They were literally the ones closest to the powerful winds that blew everything away. "Lux used her barrier to shield us, so I guess none of us got hurt?" Britta twitched the moment she heard that. "A barrier, huh? That makes more sense than mere luck." She couldn't believe that the very two whom she looked down on, or at least, one of them, was responsible for saving her life. To think she would have a barrier that strong. Is it an item? It most likely was. Britta also had an item that generated a barrier around her, but it could only be used for a limited number of times, and she had to activate the shield normally. There's no way their reaction speed exceeds mine. They were also closer to the blast, which means they had less time to prepare. Once Britta thought about all of these factors, she determined that Lux's enchanted item had to have some sort of automatic response function. A barrier that strong should most likely have a long cooldown duration. She sighed, staring cautiously around her. That meant they had no way of properly protecting themselves if the same wind blast came again. "I don't like this. I still don't know what caused the blast, but this is a dead zone. Nothing about it makes sense." Besides, Britta didn't even have the time to go over what could have caused it. "My hands are going to be full with what comes next." The consequences for such a huge blast of wind was that it would literally send a signal to any monster in close proximity to the area of impact. Naturally, the monsters would have two responses. The first would be to run away. However, this reaction was only given by the weaker creatures of the forest. The second response, which was the one Britta was personally worried about, would be to gather at the point of impact. In essence, strong monsters would see the destruction as some sort of beacon, an invitation, if you will. And, as was the nature of the wild, they always answered the call. Looking around, Britta could already see the silhouettes of the monsters that hid within the cluster of trees that now surrounded the clearing. "They're already here." Beads of sweat began to sprout from her face as she gulped down the saliva that was forming in her mouth. "This is bad. This is really bad." Her thoughts echoed as she struggled to find a possible solution to the problem at hand. Thanks to the winds blowing away the trees, which took some parts of the ground with them, we're on lower ground. The monsters had the higher ground, and them being in a clearing meant they could be surrounded from all areas. By the looks of things, that was exactly what was happening. Just how many are they? 20. No. I think even more. The only monsters who could possibly respond to such a loud explosion were A-tier monsters. Since this was their territory, it also made sense to expect them. Grrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr emerge from the forest. Just as she expected, they were incredibly large, with bodies that varied depending on their race. 4 distinct kind of monsters could be seen from the multiple sides that surrounded them. There were Ceresus, incredibly huge ones to the left. Their lion-like bodies and multiple scorpion tails made them impossible to miss. Not only were they huge and deadly, but one sting from their poison was all it took to kill most people. Then, there were hydras to the right, each having 3 heads, with slithering bodies of snakes. North and south, there were high orcs and rockablin champions. The former were practically giants with the biggest builds, while the latter were more nimble and lanky, though the mana emanating from them was far superior. I can see about 10 on each side. That meant the number she initially suspected just doubled. Britta struggled to think at this point. At most, she could only handle 3 A-tier monsters if they charged at her at once. However, even those had to be of the same race, so she could predict their attack patterns and employ a less complicated strategy to win. If you threw in monsters of different races at her, things would get exponentially more difficult. Not only would she find it very difficult to deal with their varying attack patterns, but it would be difficult to keep up with their multiple skills. She would undoubtedly lose. This was true for pretty much any adventurer, which was why parties were so important. If she had a reliable party on her side, she could deal with over 10 A-tier monsters even if they were of different races. As long as the party members did their jobs, alternating between defense, buffs, and taking the heat off her in critical moments, she would emerge victorious. Unfortunately, she had no such thing at the moment. There was no reliable party, and no chance of victory. At this point, Britta was pretty sure of one fact. I'm going to die here. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Chapter 411, Heroic Rank Test. Brute facts of nature are immutable aspects of existence that cannot be changed. They exist as a reminder that there are things we can't control. Things like death, suffering, inequality, pain, they are all examples of brute facts that remain inevitable till date. Even if concepts like gravity, space, and time can somehow be bypassed or bended to a certain degree thanks to skill and whatnot, the aforementioned remain essential aspects of reality that cannot change. And so, as Britta watched the 40, or so, monsters close in on the large clearing that her and her candidates occupied, she could see another fine example of a brute fact of nature. ISS Britta. Without a doubt, they were going to die here. Miss Britta, can you hear me? It was a foregone conclusion. There was no way out. This was definitely the end. Miss Britta, can you hear me? Britta instantly snapped out of her thoughts as soon as a deep, loud voice called out for her. Yet. She looked in front of her and saw the dark gentleman, Jet, holding her by both hands and shaking her until she finally responded. Once she returned to reality, he let her go, though the after effects of his tight grip remained as a sensation. There are a total of 47 monsters here. A few of them are hiding behind the dense walls of the trees. I see. Jet's explanation did nothing to assuage her worries. It only made her more assured of her fate. We can't beat them on our own, Miss Britta. Jet's voice appeared calm despite all of the turbulence. Still, Britta felt a bit disappointed to hear that even the haughty adventurer didn't have the confidence to win. Perhaps, deep down, she was expecting a different answer. We need to rely on teamwork. Earlier, you said we can't rely on teamwork since this is an individual test, so. You're still on about that? Britta couldn't believe her ears. They weren't even sure of survival, yet this fool was still thinking about the heroic rank test. Was there a bigger idiot than this? Well, I would very much like to pass this test. For the sake of my dream. Jet's smile seemed so distant that for a moment Britta wondered what his story was. What could be driving him so much? If we work together, Miss Perdita, we should be able to win. But we need your help. Britta, who had previously thought her death was a foregone conclusion, found herself having hope. All her skepticism vanished in the blink of an eye, and her face transformed into a look of readiness. She was resolved to whatever it took to survive. Even if she had to listen to some newbie whom she looked down on moments earlier. Luck's specialty is wind magic, and she has an A-tier skill to back it up. A-tier. Britta was shocked. Only very few individuals in all of humanity had A-tier skills. Even she, despite being a heroic rank adventurer, only had 3 B-tier skills and 1 C-tier skill. The guild master had an A-tier skill, but she wasn't even sure if the last 6-star had one. He most likely didn't, considering how very young he was. It was incredibly rare to possess an A-tier skill, since having one essentially made you one of the strongest humans to exist. The Grand Mage of the Alliance, also known as the most powerful mage of the Alliance, had only 1 A-tier skill, and she was able to reach such an incredible height. Chief Warrior, Brutus, didn't even have any A-tier skill, and yet, even he was considered the strongest man in the Alliance. Of course, having a high-tier skill wasn't a guarantee that you could use it well, but the mere mention of Lux possessing one made Britta's turbulent heart settle a little. She'll use her wind magic to restrain the enemy while you and I will attack them as quickly as possible. Jet continued. But if she's restraining them, then she'll be vulnerable. Don't worry. She has a defense item that will protect her from harm. It takes up a lot of mana, though, so we have to hurry. You unbelievable. Could that be the same item that protected us earlier? Britta felt stupefied, but she did her best to control her expression as she watched Jet, who was cautiously looking at the sneering monsters. I wonder how strong he is. Britta found herself thinking. Looks like the monsters won't be attacking each other until they eliminate us first. That makes things pretty straightforward. Jet's voice reverberated as a chuckle. Then, he reached for the briefcase that he kept on the floor. In a slow, elegant fashion, he unlocked the item, causing 2 clicks to echo out. The monsters descended, charging down at the 3 who stood at the center of the crater-like clearing. As they did this, Lux chanted her spell while Jet brought something out of his briefcase, the only thing that was inside it. It was a hilt. The hilt of a blade, to be precise, about 1 meter tall, and obsidian black in color. It had silver blue runes imprinted all over it, and it gleamed with an ominous aura. Just so you know, I have an A-tier skill as well. As Jet spoke, the runes on the hilt flashed a bright color, causing the object to transform. Like goo, it changed shape, enlarging swiftly until it became a long blade. Combined with the sacred blade passed on to me by my father, who was also granted it by his own father, I will not be defeated here. Energy surged from the blade, causing the entire area to tremble in response to its invincible power. As space itself shook, Jet took off his hat and gave Britta a confident smile while his hair danced. We're going to make it out of this alive. Somehow, Britta felt like she could believe his words. The blade he wielded, the conviction in his tone. It told her that perhaps she would be able to witness a miracle. Awaken from your slumber. With this whisper, all the blue and silver energy that ran wild began to converge on the dark blade's body. Chaos Blade. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. I've made the mistake of being slow-paced again. I shall try my best to quicken the pace a bit.